Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
This fall, coming to a conference near you. Two legends meet face to face.
Activists Bernie Cahill, Emporium presents Dan Steinberg, Billboard Live.
Bernie Cahill here. I'll be doing the keynote with Dan Steinberg at Billboard Live, Montage, Beverly Hills, November 13th.
1/10 of one score and about a month ago, our hosts brought forth on this internet a new podcast, conceived in good faith and dedicated to the proposition that all podcasts are not created equal. Now we are engaged on social media, testing whether any other podcast could possibly be as badass as Promoter 101. We have come to dedicate each episode to all of those who wish to gain insight and knowledge into the industry that they so adamantly adore, as those before us imparted their wisdom unto us. The brave men, W. Luke Pierce and the Jew, who work tirelessly to bring all of us the most insightful interviews and freshest news, have blessed us with the perfect way to kill some time on a cross-country flight or while working on our summer bods at the gym. It is for us, the awesome, to be here dedicated to the hour or so remaining before us, that subsequently we will all go leave a gleaming review on iTunes, that we here highly resolve that these men deserve nothing less than at least our humble subscription, that this podcast of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Welcome to Promoter 101.
Well, for you history buffs, that should have been fun. It's Promoter 101, and this is show 108. I'm Dan Steinberg, joined by my good friend, Mr. W. Luke Pierce. Luke?
Dan, fantastic episode of Promoter 101 in front of us. Episode 108, we've got just what the doctor ordered this week. We're going to be joined by Paradigm's Trey Manning, talking about Death Cab for Cutie and Fleet Foxes. He was on last week's podcast, got a full interview with him this week.
That was a great war story that he brought us. Can't wait to get into his full interview. We've also got legendary agent and promoter Alex Kochan talking Guns N' Roses and McCartney. Should be a blast.
Plus, the firm of Steinberg, Pierce, and Bernstein going to offer you some free legal advice today from AEG's in-house legal counsel, Mr. Jason Bernstein, the man who got us the Promoter 101 Twitter handle back, joining us in the podcast for a wee bit of legal advice.
You know, that's probably how they rate law firms in the world out there. 2 out of 3 Jews.
I got nothing.
Is that one of those jokes I'm allowed, but you're not? Birthright kind of thing?
I think through what I'm going to say there, and I say it in my head, and it just doesn't come out well. So I'm just be a little goyish over here and not say anything.
Well, for all of our friends out there, the way you drive the rent deals, I think everybody says that you're close enough to being one of the tribe at this point.
Yep.
Anyway, and news of the week with you, W. Luke Pierce.
Jim Runge, tour manager for Imagine Dragons, and we're on Promoter 101.
Dan, next week, you've got a panel. You're going to be out at the Montage Hotel in Beverly Hills doing the keynote Q&A with Bernie Cahill from Activist Artist Management. What are we looking forward to next week, Dan?
Well, let's be very clear. This is not a panel. This is a keynote interview, Luke, of the highest magnitude. I mean, we're going to get into it and talk Dwight Yoakam. We're going to talk the Dead. We're going to talk Lumineers. Bernie is a mind on the next level, and we're just going to kind of dig around a little bit and see what we can come up with. It's going to be a good time. But yeah, don't confuse this with some lowly panel bullshit. This is the keynote of Billboard Live, motherfucker.
All right. I'm sorry to offend such sensibilities about labeling your keynote interview on that stage of the Montage Hotel. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, we love to see you out there supporting Dan and our buddy Dave Brooks from Billboard Magazine, who's running this show out there. It's going to be next week, the 13th and 14th of November at the Montage Hotel in Beverly Hills. Join Dan, Bernie Cahill, some amazing guests from Dropkick Murphys to New Kids on the Block for the Billboard Live Music Summit. You can still register for that conference at billboardlivemusicsummit.com.
My last public appearance for 2018. I'm very excited. This will be good.
It'll be a race to 2019 where we're going to kick it off in January. On Wednesday, January 30th, 2019, we'll be taking it to the city of brotherly love, my adopted hometown of Philadelphia. Get the whiz ready. We'll see you at Steve's Princess Steaks. Here we come. Dan, where are we going to be?
I don't know if I'm going to be at Steve's or Princess's. I don't know, man. It's such a hard thing when you're talking about cheesesteak, you know?
We're going to hit them all. We'll do Ishkabibble to Steve's Princess Steaks. I mean, fuck gems. We don't need it. We don't need that noise in our life. We're going to stick to what we know here in Philly.
Well, we will be at the University of Arts Kaplan Recital Hall. That's 211 South Broad Street in Philly on campus. The campus is paying for this shit. They're bringing us to town. It's free. Doors open at 6:30. Show starts promptly at 7 because we have to be drinking by like 8:30 with our good friend from Live Nation as special guest, Mr. Jeff Gordon. I know some of you thought maybe the race car driver, Jeff Gordon. Fuck that. We got the mind behind Live Nation Philly with us. Jeff Gordon, special guest. Talk about break into a mind that knows this business, Luke.
This Jeff Gordon actually might move a little faster in real life than the Jeff Gordon who drove NASCAR. Looking forward to sitting down with him again. Admission to that show is free, and thank you to our friends at the University of the Arts. Chris, everybody, his whole team over there. We'll see you Wednesday, January 30th. Doors open 6:30. Get your asses in the seats early. We're looking forward to a great time.
Always weird to me when somebody offers to pay us to do the podcast somewhere. It's like, it's free online. Do you really need this to come to your campus? But
they just want the experience before Connor, our brilliant engineer and editor of this podcast, edits us down. They want it raw, Dan. That's what they want.
Not going there. Anyway, it's just the whole idea that somebody's willing to pay for something we're willing to give you for free on the air a week later. But what the hell? I'm excited that they want us in Philly, and this is going to be a good time. So come out, hang out, and then drink with us afterwards, because I imagine we'll be hitting the bars with John Hampton and Jesse Lundy and lots of our other friends out there in the Philly area.
Looking forward to it.
Hey, Luke, did you know that you can listen to Promoter 101 pretty much anywhere?
Is that true, Dan? Tell me more.
It is, Luke. It's on the World Wide Web and all of those fine places that you listen to your podcast things.
Wow. Places like Spotify? How about iTunes?
Spreaker?
iHeartRadio?
SoundCloud?
Oh my God. It's YouTube?
All the lovely places. Could we be any more smart-ass this morning? Anyway, hey, listen to us everywhere. You can follow us on Twitter. He's W. Luke Pierce. I'm the Jew, the show's Promoter 101.
That's right. And you can hit Dan and I. We love to hear from anyone that's tuning into this podcast. Drop us a line. Hit us at steiny@promoter101.net and email. That'll go to both of us. You'll get a response back.
Want to thank everybody that reached out for Big Block of Cheese Day. We had dozens upon dozens of emails, things from how do you scale a venue that you've never been in before, to how do you take on marketing in a market that you've never even visited, to what is Michael Rapinoe's cell phone. Some of those we answered. The last one, clearly we didn't. But hey, some great questions and some really, well, there's no fucking chance in hell you're getting. But anyway, you can always reach out to me and Luke for any help, because we're just here. And if we don't know, we'll point you to the right person that will. Happy to help. Promoter 101, just being a resource for you.
Hey, this is Mike McGinley, Mitch Rose, Peter Katzis, Mike Hayes, Tony from APA, Vince Bannon,
Deshaun Healy,
Steve Rennian,
Rick Canny,
Sam Kinkin,
Rob McDurf. Happy to be here on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Hey, if you've missed any of our past podcasts, you can always catch up at promoter101.net. This week, we feature a classic reissue of episode 64, dude.
That's right, Dan. Episode 64 was a doozy indeed. This is from Aspen Live. It featured a great interview with Kenneth Feld, who sat down with Jim McCarthy, the CEO of Gold Star, at the Aspen Live Music Conference.
Yeah, that was a really interactive, fun back and forth between the two of them. Kenneth Feld runs the world of kid touring, and the scope of Feld is just so so massive, from Disney on Ice to monster trucks. To hear him talk about things like Ringling Brothers, it's an incredible thing. Plus, Core Software Scott Allard speaks to the power of data, and I know that moves you personally, Luke.
It was a very, very interesting segment. I suggest everybody check it out. And we also had a great war story from our buddy at APA, Mr. Craig Newman.
Just really can't get enough Craig Newman on the podcast. He writes our theme song, just has a special, menschiness that's on the next level, don't you think?
He really does, Dan.
Hey, don't forget to drop us a review and subscribe and, do all the things.
That's right. All the things, Dan.
You know the things.
Do the fucking things.
Recently, we got a review delivered to me via a manager at Q Prime through my partner, Jason Zink, about what he thought. So that's not the easiest way to make sure that we hear is through Jason. If you put it on the website or email one of us to tell us what you think, is probably easier than sending it to Jason or maybe Brits or something. Just send it to us directly.
Yep.
Mike Luba, Madison S. Presents Promoter 101.
That's the sound of groundbreaking news. We've got Dave Shapiro with Sound Talent Group, brand new, right out of the box, man. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. Super excited to get this rolling.
So you, Tim Bohr, you guys got a whole team behind you, but you guys are coming out some really cool shit, right off the bat.
Yeah, man. We've got Tim Bohr, myself, Matt Anderson, Beth Keith, Eric Powell, Jackie Gaffoon is going to be handling all of our tour marketing. And of course, we've got support staff. And so, yeah, day one, we are about 10 people strong. And of course, we were so fortunate to have such loyal and amazing artists to come with us and go down this path with us. So on top of all of the staff, between all of the agents, the company has a collective roster of about 100 artists. And we're really excited to get this thing off the ground.
Man, that's amazing. So long run at the agency group, and that got swallowed up by UTA, and you guys did a handful of years over there. But you and Tim continuing to work together, and sounds like just right off the bat, you guys are just a fierce to be reckoned with.
That was definitely the goal. We didn't want to skip a beat because we've obviously, as you pointed out, have been doing this a long time, and we're hoping for a smooth transition and basically to just keep doing what we're doing, but kind of on our own terms. And sure enough, that's how it's really felt. The support out there has been overwhelming. The responses have been extremely humbling, from peers in the industry to artists to press. I mean, everyone that we've spoken with has just been so accepting and excited of the prospect of everything that we have going on here. So we're ready to roll, and been a long time coming, and we're excited.
And we could talk for days about UTA versus, but at the end of the day, you and Tim are just fierce entrepreneurs and always have been. So the ideas of you guys running your own shop just makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. UTA is a great place, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that situation at all. We had a great time there, a great experience there, and a lot of people there still that I consider very, very close friends and family, basically, at this point. Been working with some of these people for a very long time. But as you point out, we are very entrepreneurial. We have owned a lot of businesses outside of, booking bands. I mean, Tim ran a restaurant and bar. I had a record label that I built and sold to BMG. And between all of us, we've got a lot of collective, not just music business experience, but business experience. And so the idea of running our own business and every day showing up to work to build our business as opposed to someone else's was just really appealing.
And you guys are bi-coastal right off the bat. You got Tim in New York. You're going to obviously be in Southern California, I imagine, between San Diego and LA still?
Yeah, that's right. Our office is going to be in San Diego. So the whole West Coast staff is moving to San Diego, and we'll be based down here. However, we'll, of course, still be in LA all the time. Even in the last 2-3 weeks since we've kind of started to get things rolling as we've been working through our UTA exit, I've been in LA quite a bit for shows and meetings and things of that nature. And Tim's in the same boat because he's actually based in Philly, but, obviously goes to New York a lot and works up there. And, Matt Anderson, our other partner, is West Coast based, and he's going to be moving down south as well. So, yeah, we're just San Diego and Philly are the two offices. And then we'll be spending lots of time in New York and LA and all the other fun places we travel to see our clients.
Well, we couldn't be more excited for you. Mad congratulations on that. If people want to get a hold of you, the best way is?
Yeah, Dave at soundtalentgroup.com. We also have a general email, just info@soundtalentgroup.com if you're just trying to reach the company. And we can, of course, then direct that message to the appropriate place. SoundTalentGroup.com has also all the info, our full staff, our roster, all that info.
It's the first place to look if you're looking to book Hanson.
That's right.
Congratulations, man. I'm stoked for you. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast and breaking the news with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
News of the week.
It's time for News of the Week. Kicking off the news this week, wrapping some stuff up from Wall Street, Live Nation announcing they've had, and I quote, the best quarter yet. The concert giant announced that the 2018 third quarter was the best quarter ever, pointing to the acquisition of a promising promotions business with offices in Seattle, Denver, and Birmingham as the main driver for the success this quarter. I'm of course kidding. Nowhere in the quarterly report is there a mention of that aforementioned company, whose name I won't mention. I'll save you all the time of reading a very long quarterly report to find that information. It did, however, contain the results: a $3.8 billion quarter in sales with more than 85 million tickets sold, which is 11% higher year over year, with an operating income of $234 million, up 16% year over year. Live Nation trading near the highs of its 52-week period here in the stock market. Also out, some figures from YouTube this week. Leo Cohen basically saying that YouTube is paying a shit ton of money. The video streaming giant YouTube announced this past week that it paid out more than $1.8 billion to music rights holders in the 12 months to end the September 2018 portion of this year, and that's in advertising revenues alone. But the story this week that I thought was interesting was the comparison of the payouts being made by YouTube to Spotify, who, according to Music Business Worldwide, has paid nearly 10 billion euros worth of money to rights holders since 2008. So when you look at the same period in the fourth quarter of 2017 through September 2018 for both businesses, it's estimated that Spotify was paying roughly $300 million US per month compared to YouTube's $150 million US per month. That's a staggering difference, nearly double in terms of dollars paid out between the services. And we should note that Spotify payouts being funded by the subscription model as a wider breadth of revenue to be tapping into. And finally, in passing news here, I have to say goodbye to Ticketfly. The ticketing middle market giant here, run by Andrew Dreskin, announced on Thursday in an email to its employees and to its clients that they would be sunsetting the Ticketfly brand and migrating all of their customers over to Eventbrite Music. This coming just recently after Ticketfly was acquired for $200 million by Eventbrite, who recently IPO'd. That'll do it for News of the Week.
This is Andrea Johnson from ICM Partners, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
It's everyone's favorite time, the announcement of the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
We're excited to announce that the winner of the Badass of the Week is from all the way over on the other side of the pond in the UK. ILMC's own Greg Parmley. He runs the conference. The UK loves him, and he's a hell of a guy, making him this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
As they would say across the pond, cheers, Greg.
This is Charles Attell, C3 Presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
In our featured interview this week, the first interview of episode 108 of Promoter 101, we are excited to have back Paradigm's Trey Manning. He joined us last week in episode 107 for an amazing war story, and we're pleased to have him this week for a full-length interview.
That's just good promo when you have the war story and then you have the person on. It's like you're building the hype.
They call that in network a lead-in, Dan.
A lead-in. And right there's your lesson of the week. You've learned something right here on Promoter 101 from your good friend, Luke Pierce. Trey Manning, dude, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
You've got one of those careers that continues to find bands that are critically acclaimed cool. Not me just saying they're cool. Like, your roster is incredible.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. It's been great. I mean, my goal has always been to work with bands that I love, that if I weren't in the business, I would still listen to and go see play shows all the time. I feel very blessed to be able to do it.
These are bands that you have found and discovered before they broke, so you were in there first. What is it that you have found? Because you haven't done this once. You've done this like 5 or 6 times.
I wish that I had some formula, because it's sort of just different every time. I listen to a lot of music that people send me. And back when I started, it wasn't quite as internet heavy. I mean, I started as an agent in 98, and it was pretty hard to download.
That was Arrow?
Yeah, Arrow Booking was started in 98. You couldn't really download an MP3 then. I was still getting CDs and cassettes in the mail and stuff like that. And just kind of reaching out to friends that I knew and respected at labels like Sub Pop and Secretly Canadian and Merge and just a ton of great independent labels that I just grew up as a fan of anyway. And every time I started working with a band and I would talk to that label person, like somebody like Tony K at Sub Pop would send me new ideas and we would just keep in touch. And I've just had some good luck with that, relying on some smart people that have good ears.
So did you know Tony because you were a Northwest guy?
Well, I started my booking agency, Arrow Booking, I started in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan and I kind of fell into the business in a weird way. I was playing music first. And when my wife and I found out we were going to have a baby, I wasn't making any money playing music. So I thought, well, let's see what I can do. If I could work from home, take care of our baby, and run a small business out of our apartment, should I start a label or should I start a booking agency? And I decided that a label required lots of overhead.
And capital.
Right? And I was like, well, no, I know touring, so I think I'll just start a booking agency. And it was in a weird roundabout way. I kind of got the suggestion from Suzanne from Flower Booking because I was trying to get her to book one of my bands. And she said, no. She said, I like you, but I'm not going to book your band, but you should just start your own agency.
The blueprint for your agency and looking at Suzanne's, that makes a lot of sense when you look at Flower. The early days.
Totally.
When you say it, that becomes real easy to see.
Yeah, I mean, Tortoise, Sea and Cake, Jimmy World, Jets to Brazil, Promise Ring, Interpol.
Was it Jawbreaker too?
I think that Tim started working with Jets to Brazil after Jawbreaker was already gone. I don't know the timeline on that one.
Cool stuff, but it was pretty artsy.
Super cool. Yeah. So basically, I was in a band that Suzanne booked, and then I wanted her to book my other band, and she said, no, but you should just start your own agency. And I was like, I can do that? She's like, yeah, you just get an email address and start booking your own stuff. And I was like, okay. And then I don't think I thought of it again.
So this is what year? Circa what?
That was probably 96 that she made that suggestion. The idea stuck in the back of my head. And then in 98, when I was like, okay, I need to do something other than going on the road and playing drums and guitar in random independent bands that weren't making money. That's when I did that.
And were you the guy booking the gigs in your band? Because usually there's one guy that's the business mind.
I was in a band on 4AD called His Name's Alive, and Mitch from Mob Agency was our agent.
Mitch Oakman.
Yeah, totally great agent. I learned a lot reading his tour itineraries that were faxed over. And then I was in a band called Licorice, also on 4AD, tiny band, and Suzanne booked that band. And that's how I figured out how to route tours. And I was in most of the bands that I played in, I was the guy that was stuck settling the shows and kind of keeping track of the money. So I kind of figured out some of that stuff.
By default.
By default.
Almost to not it.
Right, yeah. And which is weird because in some of the bands, if I was playing drums, I had to tear down my drum kit and settle the show, which is a real pain. Way too much. And I was just talking with Dave Kaplan recently. One of the bands that I played in had a sold out show at the Kilowatt when he was the talent buyer and running the Kilowatt, and I settled a show with him. I remember he gave me this nugget, this music industry nugget that stuck with me for 20 years. I said, hey, man, that was a great show. He's like, yeah, your band's great, whatever. And we sold out the show. And I was like, on Wednesday night, I'm like, we'd love to come back and play on a Saturday. And he's like, you can't ever play here on a Saturday night. I was like, why not? He's like, your fans don't drink. I was like, oh, right. Just because the show was sold out doesn't mean that it was necessarily a good night for the club. This light bulb went off in my head. It's like, oh, right. Club bands have to sell beer, not just tickets. They got to sell beer.
Right, because the money's made on the F&B.
Right. I kind of didn't really learn anything from that because none of my clients really sell that much beer at their shows, but at least I kind of got some perspective and some understanding on why. Years later, like with Pedro the Lion, a lot of clubs would just be like, really like your band, but they can't play on Friday or Saturday.
Because they're an all-age band, really.
Right. At the time, they were just all-ages stuff, and their fans didn't drink.
Those bands have been around long enough that most of their fans are actually over 21.
Now the fans are old. But back then, there was very all-ages, and even sort of the vibe, most of the stuff that I book, it's not party music for the most part. Not heavy drinking music.
Which is kind of funny because I always kind of felt like the bar was my problem as a promoter. But to hear that, bar owners make you know that it's your problem too.
Yeah, it is. And it kind of made me understand, well, like a place like Mercury Lounge where, you get 75% of the door, they can do that because they're making money selling drinks. That's why when you're playing at the Paramount Theater in Seattle, they're not going to give you 75% of the door, which would be a fantastic deal.
It would be. I don't think anybody's getting that.
Nobody's getting that deal.
Amazing ticket price.
No, I'd give it a try, though, if you're game. Adam Zachs, if you're listening, 75% of the door? I don't know. Probably not.
We do a good number of shows at the Paramount. I'm trying to think of what I'd have to crank the ticket to get you a 75% of the door walkout. Because it's
$400? Yeah.
No, it wouldn't be $4, but I bet it'd be verging 150. to like make that work.
I'll work on that.
We'll do the math. You know, I'm curious.
Okay.
We'll pull up the formula when we're done and look at
Mercury
it.
Lounge deal at the Paramount. That'd be fantastic.
We'll have to do open floor so it has the right feel, though.
Fair enough.
Which is probably one of the coolest parts of the Paramount.
I do love that fantastic feature
Those
of
of
that
you
room.
that have never been at the Paramount in Seattle, they have the ability to drop the seats and make the entire ground floor one even level, so you feel like you're in a ballroom.
Yep.
The biggest ballroom you've ever been in. And it's fucking cool.
Yeah, it's an amazing venue, and it can go from being a very fancy feeling like sit-down venue to being like the Wiltern in the course of an hour or two. How long does it take to switch that over?
I think the transition's a couple hours, but it's really fairly quick, and they can do it while you're loading in. It can be happening simultaneously. Tobin Center has something similar to that, San Antonio, where they can move the size of it and reconfigure, and they can do a flat thing, so that's state-of-the-art technology there.
Didn't you just have Aaron was on the show?
Zimmerman, yeah, he's great.
Yeah, good guy.
Let's digress back into your career.
So I started my company, Aero Booking, in 1998 in Seattle. First 3 clients were Pedro the Lion, Damian Jurado, and kind of an alt-country band from Athens, Georgia called Vigilantes of Love.
Oh, I knew Vigilantes of Love.
And then shortly thereafter, I moved to Seattle in 2000.
They predated you, right? Like in the industry?
Yeah.
I remember them opening for The Call or something.
Yeah,
like
The Call.
Big AAA hit in like 93 or 94.
Yep. Those are my first 3 clients. Moved to Seattle in 2000. And actually, when I moved to Seattle, my wife and our son and I stayed at Damian Jurado's house while we were looking for an apartment. And then when I got to Seattle, I was booking shows, and then I started playing in Pedro the Lion as a touring member while I was booking the shows. I met Adam Voith in 98, but then reconnected with Adam Voith in 2000. And the first tour that I played with Pedro the Lion after moving, Adam Voith was selling merch on that tour. And so we connected over that. And I just started working with Death Cab for Cutie, who had just left Red Rider.
Oh, they were Eric's?
They weren't Eric's. There was somebody else. There was a woman that worked at Red Rider who booked Death Cab, and she left, or Death Cab left her. I don't know the details of it. I had been trying to book Death Cab. I got a cassette of their first record before it came out, and I kept calling their house when they were going to Western in Bellingham, Washington. I kept calling and leaving messages on their answering machine, trying to book them. But then their agent from Red Rider called me and said, yeah, I just signed Death Cab. And I was super bummed. I was like, shoot, I didn't get it. But kept in touch with them, and they were friends with Pedro the Lion. And then when they stopped working with her and I just moved to Seattle, then we started working together. So I was still playing drums and touring a little bit with Pedro the Lion. And then that first tour I played in Seattle after moving there, Adam Voith was selling merch. And that's when we became really good friends. And on that tour, I was like, hey, man, when we're done with this tour, do you want to like come hang at my apartment in the back room where I book shows, and maybe you could try to book some bands too? And he was like, I don't know, dude, that doesn't sound like my thing. And I'm like, no, I think you'd be like really, like, you've got great taste in music. You're super smart, super hard worker. And he was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
How'd that turn out?
Pretty good. Yeah. I can't take credit for it. His smarts and his great ears and his hard work has obviously paid off well. But I was there at the beginning, and I'm glad that I was. And he still remains one of my best friends in the world.
I think he gave you a little bit of credit when he was on the podcast, actually, if I remember correctly, which was about a year ago. That's a great interview. He's got an awesome career.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic person, fantastic agent.
Well, let me ask you about this. You got a baby at home.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a business that's starting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on the road playing good-sized clubs, probably in a van, if not a very small tour bus.
It was definitely a minivan.
You're balancing an amazing amount between running your agency from the road and having a family and keeping a new marriage together. Like,
yeah.
That's a lot.
It was too much. So around 2001, kept working with Pedro the Lion, but stopped playing in the band. Focused full-time on being an agent, running my agency. Back then, Wi-Fi was not really even that big of a thing yet. So like I would show up at a show and I'd be running around trying to find someplace to dial in with AOL on my laptop.
It
wasn't really a thing. Yeah, it wasn't really a sustainable thing. Stopped playing on the road, continued working with Pedro Lion and Death Cab, and started trying to grow the business and focusing on that.
That'd be a hard life decision though, but clearly there was a lot of things pulling you in different directions.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm talking to potential clients, one of the things that I'll bring up, and I'll mention that I got my start as a touring musician. I say, look, I know it's hard. On one hand, touring is fun. And on the other hand, touring is really hard. And so my goal as an agent is to book tours that if I were still a touring musician, that I'd want to play those tours. I want to book you a tour that would be worthwhile to spend that time on the road, driving, loading all your gear up 2 flights of stairs, in February in Salt Lake City. I know it's hard work, but I want to do the work with you for a sustainable future. I have that perspective, and I'm thankful for that.
Okay, so Death Cab explodes.
I mean, they were consistently growing. When I first started working with them, they would sell out Spaceland, then 2 nights at Spaceland. Then they'd play the Troubadour, Great American Music Hall, then 2 Great American Music Halls. And they were on like a slow path of growth, but always growing. In 2003, they released Transatlanticism. It was their last record on Barsuk. They saw a significant spike in business, started playing to more than 1,000 people. That was right after Ben had put out Postal Service record on Sub Pop. When I started working with Postal Service, it was a weird one. I remember Ben called me and he was like, hey, I've got this side project. It's like an electronic thing with this guy, Jimmy Tamborello. We're just going to put out a record and do 1 tour. Do you want to book it? And I'm like, of course I do. And he's like, well, let me give you a CDR just to make sure that you like it. And I'm like, I'm sure I will, but fine. And I remember him coming by my apartment. I lived on the ground floor. He popped a CDR through the mail slot, sent me an email or called me to say that he dropped it off. I listened to it and I was like, oh, yeah, I think people are going to enjoy this.
I get this.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And so they just did 1 tour. They played 1 club tour in 2003. And I think the biggest show on the tour, like we had like a Bowery Ballroom, then we added a second Bowery Ballroom, then we added a North 6, which I believe North 6 turned that around and built Music Hall of Williamsburg at North 6. Not sure if that's true. That's my recollection of it.
Get Glancy to clean up the details
Glancy
on that.
he knows the story. By the end of that tour, I think we moved the show from the Echo to the Palace, which is now the Avalon, and they played to more than 1,000 people, and that was the biggest show on the tour, and I couldn't believe it. That was the first time I ever had one of my clients play to more than 1,000 people, and it blew my mind.
There's some milestone there when you break 1,000 tickets.
1,000 is great.
It's a lot of fucking people.
It's still super exciting.
Yeah, the energy in the room when you break 800 tickets, really, when you see 800 people in a room gather into a band, that's some energy.
It's awesome. That was like the spring of 2003, and then in the fall of 2003, Death Cab puts out Transatlanticism. Their business starts to skyrocket as well, and they started playing like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people. And then they signed to Atlantic, and Plans was kind of like the really big takeoff record.
One of the few gigs we've done, I know there's been some support stuff, but one of the few headline gigs was Death Cab played the Vineyard that I booked in Eugene.
Oh, Eugene. Yeah, that's right.
Right in the middle of that cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember how cool of a moment it was. And the funny part of the whole thing was, as smooth as everything was, I remember you calling me the morning of the show saying, hey, you're at the show. I was like, yeah. You're like, go see Spoon. You'll like Spoon. They're opening. And Spoon was a very young band. And I was like, okay. It's like, anything else? It's like, no, I think you'll like them.
Really?
But yeah, you don't remember this?
I don't remember that.
But you checked on me. You're like, hey, how's loading going? Everything cool? It's like, yeah. It's like, you're there. And yeah, it's like, check out Spoon. I think you'll like them.
Yeah.
And that was because usually when an agent calls morning of a big show, and it was a big show, I think we did like 4,000 tickets or something. I just remember that, like, is the band unhappy? What's going on? She's like, no, I haven't heard anything. I don't book them. I really like this album. No, but you're like, I really like the album. I think you'll like these guys.
Totally. Yeah. And Spoon is like, what a consistent band.
You don't remember that?
I don't remember that, but it sounds like something I would say because I'm a huge fan and I've never worked with them. I just like them.
You weren't the agent, but it was just, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it was like, and I made a point to like watch the flow of people coming into the venue from a point of the access where I could see the stage so I could watch Spoon.
I mean, my goal has always been to approach this as a music fan first, and we can figure out the business later sort of thing. If I love a band, if I love a musician, I listen to it and I think, okay, well, I love this. Should I just try to be a fan of this and just listen to the records and go to the shows? Or is this something that I think I'd be a good fit working with them? If I think it's a good fit, then I chase it, and sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But I always say, like, I could probably make more money applying the same level of effort to something that was less artistic. No disrespect, but like real estate or insurance or something like that. But I'm not really good at selling things that I don't care about. And so I'm kind of stuck with this. And I really only want to work with bands and musicians that make music that I'm proud of. So I don't feel like I'm lying when I'm selling.
Something you're truly passionate about.
Yeah, this is really great. And you should take a listen. You should give this a shot. Not always right. There are great records that weren't as popular as we believe they should be. And I have clients that are the same way. And that's always a bummer. But, when things don't go as well as I hope they would, I'm going to stick with the stuff that I believe in and see where it goes.
For Death Cab, it seemed to be there. And Fleet Foxes, which is another band that you've had great success with.
Yeah, Fleet Foxes is one where they were kind of kicking around Seattle for a while. I think they opened, I was working with a band called Midlake. Midlake is an example of a band I still love to this day that started going somewhere and then it just kind of stalled out, and it shouldn't have. They're an amazing band. All the records are great. And it just kind of like tapped out at one point.
And they were getting good support slots, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They had the look.
So Trials of Van Occupanthers, their record that did the best business, they took kind of a long break. And when they came back, it just never connected again. It was really frustrating. But like they put out more good records and it was just one of those things. But anyway, I still love that band. Great guys, great people. But I think Fleet Foxes opened for them, or Robin from Fleet Foxes came to a Mid-Lake show and I met him there. And they were just a band that was kind of kicking around Seattle a bunch. And then I kept in touch with Robin. I asked him to send me some demos, and he sent me demos for their first Sub Pop release. And I kind of fell out of my chair. I was like, this is incredible. And at the time I was like, this is incredible. I don't know what kind of business it does, because it was before, I'm terrible at like describing the genre, but whatever you want to call Fleet Foxes and Bon Iver, like modern folk or experimental folk or indie folk or whatever people want to call that.
Triple A folk coolness.
Whatever, whatever that is or whatever that
Cross
was.
the Americana.
Right. And yeah, and at the time I just thought like, is this going to be too quiet for rock clubs? Is it going to translate on the stage well? But I didn't care. I was like, I don't know where it lands, but I don't really care because I think these songs are incredible. And I just chased them around town until I saw them at Bumbershoot, and then I took them to dinner afterwards. They agreed to let me be their agent, and I was stoked. 2008 was a crazy year for them. 2009, towards the end of the cycle, they played Saturday Night Live. I went, and this is one of my favorite live show experiences that I had nothing to do with, because I don't book SNL. That's not my thing. That's the publicist.
Right, they're in the labels.
Right, label and publicist. Kate Jackson, their publicist, amazing publicist. She booked them on SNL, got that done. And at the time, I think that they were one of the smallest bands with like the lowest sound scan to ever play SNL. So it was like a big risk for Saturday Night Live, but one that totally worked. It was great. So this is a live experience. I got to go. I went with my wife. I sat with all their parents, like up on the balcony, and watched all their parents crying during their set. And it was
their sons made it, and you got to watch that.
Yeah, no, it was so incredible, because like their parents are probably late 20s, early 30s when Saturday Night Live came out. It was like a big deal in the 70s. And then they get to go and watch their kids on Saturday Night Live. That was incredible. It was beautiful. It was moving. I cherished that moment. It was so awesome.
That's a cool bonding experience.
Yeah,
you get to share with your band and their family.
Yeah. No, I was so proud, even though it was something that I didn't really have much to do with. I was just there when it happened. I was so happy.
Your band's been pretty fucking loyal to you. More so than maybe most agents have been lucky enough to be in the business.
I'm fortunate in that regard. Yeah, I'm happy about that.
Is that part of that? Things like spending Saturday Night Live with their parents and getting to be interwoven? I mean, I don't feel like it's a sales pitch for you doing it, but things like that are going to attach you to that band deeper, and that obviously was organic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I have a close personal connection with a number of the bands that I work with. I don't expect that those personal connections are going to be the only currency that matters. And I just try to work really hard and find them all the opportunities that they are looking for and do my best work. And it's gone pretty well so far. And I intend to keep working as hard as I have been, and harder as I learn more. One of the things that I really enjoy about the music business, even though it's sometimes hard, is that there's always something new to learn. There's always the music business is always changing. You can't ever just kind of sit and relax and think you got it dialed, because you don't, because it's going to change in a week or a month or a year. I mean, it's so different now than 5 years ago. It was just totally different. It's always changing. So it's like you have to keep up. And that's what I'm trying really hard to do.
You were an indie.
Yes.
And you got gobbled by a bigger agency.
Yes.
How did the end of Arrow come, and how did the transition and pieces moving about that got you to Paradigm? And there were some steps in between, I know.
There are a couple of steps.
I'm going to let you diagram this and try and get the fuck out of the way.
So Arrow booking around 2006, I started thinking about and talking to a few other agencies and just having casual conversations. And then a couple of those conversations became more serious. And what I realized at the time, let me back up for a second. Adam Voith, after the Pedro Line tour, he ended up coming to Arrow Booking, working with me from around 2000 to 2000, maybe 3-ish. And then he decided that he wanted to go start his own agency. That was a bummer, because I love the guy and I wanted to keep working with him, but we remained friends. He started his own agency. He actually bought the database that I developed for Arrow Booking, and I would go over like once a month to help him tweak a few features in here. We kept in touch. We stayed friends.
You made your own software.
I did. Yeah, it was a FileMaker database. I'm not like a coder or anything like that, but I'm a guy who loves organization. I love systems and all that kind of stuff. So Adam and I stayed in touch that way. Adam had a company called Decorporated, did that for maybe a year and a half or 2 years. and then decided that he didn't actually enjoy running his own business.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's really hard.
The back office of the agency thing takes away from the actual booking your acts.
It does. And even when it's only you and one other person or you and two other people, it's still like a lot of
contracts, chasing deposits, take accounts.
Payroll,
it's a lot of work.
All that kind of stuff. So Adam talked to Allie and Botch and did a deal with Billions. And I'd been talking with Allie and Botch before that. At the time, I was like, no, I still want to try to build my own thing.
Was that attractive because Allie was already in Seattle?
I think Allie moved to Seattle maybe 2001 or 2. Again, timeline's fuzzy.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So Adam left Arrow, had his own thing, went to Billions. And then as I was having conversations with other companies around 2006 and kind of reconsidering, do I want to keep trying to build my own thing or do I want to go and work with somebody else? I had great conversations with Allie and Botch and Adam and kind of realized the agency that I was trying to build at Arrow was Billions. I just wanted Arrow Booking to be like Billions. And I thought, well, if I can just go work at Billions, why not do that? So I did. And it was amazing. And I got to go.
So they took the back office off your desk
too,
right?
Took that off my desk. Started there in 2008.
How much of a relief was that just to be an agent?
Huge. I mean, there were so many days where I'd be like, oh, wait, I don't have to deal with this anymore. And Botch would be like, no, we take care of that for you. And like, when I'm booking travel, I don't have to do this. He's like, no, just send the receipt. It's all these things. It was such a relief. And not only that, just being able to work with these agents that I was trying to emulate. I was trying to emulate Botch, trying to emulate Allie for years.
You were on the All-Star team.
Right. Now I got to work with them. And then also being there with my friend Adam, who I'd started out with, essentially, was amazing. It was great.
So Adam beat you there.
Adam beat me there by a couple of years. And so it was great to be back on the same team as Adam. And by that time, so when I came to Billions, I brought Death Cab, Fleet Foxes, Beach House, and Midlake with me, along with Pedro the Lion, who was the main guy, and Pedro the Lion was going solo, and a handful of other artists. And that was 2008. And by then, I'd been living in Seattle for about 8 years, and we opened a bigger office, because at the time, Allie was just working from her house. And so we opened a Billions Seattle office at the Paramount. We actually had our offices on the 3rd floor of the Paramount building.
Was Adam still in Seattle?
Adam moved to Indiana before I joined Billions. So we never worked at Billions in the same city. Another key piece of this is that I hired Andrew Morgan to work at Arrow Booking for me in 2006-ish, and he also came with me to Billions. At the time, he had a few clients, but he didn't end up keeping any of them. So he came to Billions with me as an associate and then became an agent a few years later.
You've got a terrible knack of finding talent, not only on the artist side, but...
I feel fortunate to found people that are great friends, like Adam Voith and Andrew Morgan, who also are great agents, like Adam Voith and Andrew Morgan. Andrew Morgan and I, just like Adam Voith, were still great friends. In fact, before this interview, I just had coffee with Andrew Morgan or visited with his 2 twin baby kids.
So now you're leaving Billions. Let's go from there. 5 years?
No, I was Billions from 2008 to 2018, earlier this year.
10 years.
10 years at Billions, and it was amazing. It was not an easy decision to make, but I felt like it was the right decision for me, for my clients, and for my career moving forward, and for my family. The only way I know how to take care of my family is by taking care of my clients. And I thought that the best way to take care of my clients was to make a change. And it's not because I didn't love Billions, but it was because I thought it was the right thing to do at the right time. It was hard because given the choice, I'd rather be on the same team and have the same email address as Adam Voith, Andrew Morgan, Stephen Himmelfarb, and keep working with, other amazing people like obviously Botch, Matt Yaseko and Allison Wazowski and Brandy Champion, and people that played a huge role in making Billions the awesome place that it is. So it was hard making that decision, but I felt like it was the right thing to do at the right time.
Okay, so Paradigm comes out as the front runner for you.
Yes.
I assume Tom Windish and some of the other guys there were big leading hands towards that agency. Kaplan, I'm guessing.
Totally. The thing that I love about Paradigm is that it's a giant group of people that all came from the same independent spirit. Not the same musical genre and not the same era, whether you're talking about Dan Weiner or Marty Diamond or Kevin French or Tom Windish and Sam Hunt or Paul Morris. They're all entrepreneurs in different genres and from slightly different eras or time frames, but they all ended up at the same spot. And I don't think that's a mistake. It's a company that fosters autonomy and an independent spirit within a larger organization that still manages to make it a team effort. And it's amazing.
Kevin French is an interesting agent that you mentioned because you guys seem like you cut from a very similar cloth.
Yeah. Kevin and I think I met Kevin around 2000 or 2001. I was working with a band called Hot Hot Heat, and we did a co-headline tour with Hot Hot Heat and the Walkmen. And we kept in touch after that. I think about a year after I went to Billions, he went to Paradigm, took Big Shot touring to Paradigm, and we just stayed in touch. The thing about this business is that all these agents, I mean, we're competing fiercely with each other, but I think I'd hope there's still a lot of mutual respect. Fight against X, Y, or Z agent for the same band. And then once we sign it, then it's like, all right, well, let's see if we put some tours together. That doesn't mean people don't then turn around a couple years later and try to grab it. But Kevin's been somebody who's a great example of just like a great agent with great ears, awesome guy. I love his roster. Stoked to be on the same team as him.
Now, when you're at a same agency with someone, I assume, and I don't know, but if you're both going for the same band, is that how the teamwork thing usually comes in play, where you see teams of agents now going after acts, so people aren't cannibalizing each other, but they're putting all their resources together?
That's a great question. I'm still pretty new at Paradigm, so I might not be the best one to ask, but the experience that I've had so far is that I don't see a lot of ego about that kind of stuff. For example, like Jonathan Levine came to a group of us a few weeks ago and said, hey, there's this new artist. We're not sure who the best agent of the best agent team would be for this, but it seems like something that you might like or this group of people might like. So let's put our heads together and see if we can go get it. That's what I'm looking for. I love that stuff.
It seems like he's big on that too, like putting teams together for his acts and like having a bunch of players. So there's a bunch of different ears and different conversations around the industry picking up on stuff for the acts.
Yeah. And the goal is always, we're trying to build sustainable careers. So it's like, let's find the right mix of people, not just based on who has the best roster, who's the most senior agent or whatever, but it's like, who's got the right instincts and the right ears and the right aesthetic for this to land something. And then we're off to the races. And that kind of stuff is really exciting to me.
You're now at a major agency, but it's kind of works with the vibe of a big indie.
Yeah, which is something I love. There are so many agents at the company that sometimes I'll forget. It's like, oh, that's right. We've got these people doing this amazing work. I just can't keep up. And the roster is large, but it's also, everybody has really high standards and works really hard. And, Monterey International just came into the fold, which has been awesome to have like Gary Buck, Ron Kaplan, that I didn't really know that well before coming to Paradigm. And it's been really fun getting to know them and see how they work and see what they're excited about and what their future holds. It's awesome.
Seems full circle to me that Monterey Peninsula would be back with Monterey artists.
No, it's great.
It was always confusing to me that they didn't come along in the first place, like back in the early days. So for me, since I've been buying long enough to remember when most of those guys were on the same team, it was very confusing how that didn't come along as one piece in the first place. But
no, it's super cool. Like, Ron Kaplan's somebody that I didn't really know before coming to Paradigm. I mean, I knew his name and I knew what he worked on. So it's been cool. And, he spends a lot of time in the Beverly Hills office, and it's been cool, like sitting down, having a coffee with that guy and talking about Van Morrison. It's pretty amazing.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Let's come full circle with this. You have gone from being an indie to being one of the biggest agencies in the world. You've been able to keep an amazing roster, loyal, and continue to build. And you've developed this amazing career where you're on the all-star team now, essentially. Any advice for like the young agents coming up behind you? And like, I don't think you had a roadmap on how you were getting there, but looking back, can you give some advice?
I never interned anywhere, and I didn't go to college. I didn't study music business in school. Those are things that exist now that I didn't know about when I started. I kind of fell into this. I think if I could go back, I wish that I would have interned earlier. There were things that took me like 3 or 5 years to figure out that an intern would learn them in the first week on the job. Here's a good example. I knew what the letters GBOR meant, but I couldn't figure out exactly what they stood for until I'd been an agent for like 3 years. And in fact, I called another agent at an independent agency, and I won't name who this person was because I don't want to embarrass them without asking permission first. But I was like, I know that G stands for gross, but I can't figure out the rest of it. What that person called me back 2 hours later, and they were like, it's gross box office receipts. And I was like, why couldn't I figure that out? But like, if I were an intern, you just learn that the first week.
Right, because it's very Hollywood, because it's more of a motion picture side of things where you talk gross box office receipts.
But
it carried through because the film agencies and the music agencies are the same agencies in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, and I started my agency in Ann Arbor and then had an agency in Seattle.
And you probably didn't have a film and TV division.
And I did not. No film and TV at Aero Booking. And so there were just these things like, I know that means gross, but I don't know what all these letters stand for. Those are things I could have learned in a week if I interned. So I guess that would be something. I'd, go intern at one of these companies. You'll learn a lot really fast. But the other thing is just, I still feel like most people can figure out if you're not sincere. I think it's important to only work with music that you actually care about. Try not to be elitist about it, but it's pretty easy to spot the people that are representing things just because they think it's going to make a bunch of money, and the ones that are like truly, really excited and passionate about this music. It's just easier to do a good job for things that you care about.
Well, thank you so much for taking time and doing the podcast.
Yeah, of course.
I really, truly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Trey Manning is just killing it. He's got ears and he's just next level. Thrilled that we could finally have him here on Promoter 101. And a big shout out to Tom Windish for helping bridge that gap and making sure that that interview happened.
This is John Schultz. I'm Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks. Dave Ratner.
John Holiday.
Doug Bicknell.
LX.
Imong Shaw. Kelly Lefko.
Gerald B. Henley.
Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox. Joe Escalante.
Blair LeBlanc.
Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon.
Nick Farkas. Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101. Tweets of the week.
Dan, it's that time of the week. The show has called it. We can't avoid them. It's time for some Promoter 101 tweets of the week. Let's start here. Always entertained when people are so willing to ask you to do a major favor and you just know they'll never even do a small one for you.
Beware of people promising to pay you back when they've never showed any signs of friendship before they need something from you. Be a little skeptical of that.
Gotta love that people tell you, I'll get back to you ASAP after you've been waiting on them for over a week.
Yeah, flaky is as flaky does, my friend.
Ego is not cost effective.
Hashtag truth, motherfucker.
That'll do it for some Promoter 101 tweets of the week. Make sure you keep up with Dan on Twitter. He's at The Jew.
Hey, this is Brian O'Connell with Live Nation, and we are on Promoter 101.
All rise. Legal Tips is now in session.
Now, we're here to drop some knowledge on you once again with some free legal advice from AEG's in-house counsel in front of the podcast, Mr. Jason Bernstein.
This is where us at Promoter 101 save you the legal fee. Welcome back to the podcast, Jason.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
What legal advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, I thought it would be good to talk about not everything always goes perfectly well. And there have actually been times where the show just doesn't happen, and that can raise some issues.
In my career, I find this to be about 2.5% of the time, something that you can't expect happens. Shows just don't play. Whether it's weather, whether it's act of God, whether it's the artist losing their voice, sometimes you just can't.
The idea is the show must go on, and if it can, it will. I've even learned that if I don't have the contract done in time, the show's still going to happen. But once in a while, you get those flukes where either the artist isn't up to it or there's a weather issue or something happens and the show doesn't go on or it gets postponed. So figured we'd talk about that a little bit. I should start at the very beginning. We're around Halloween, and back in like 1982, I think it was their original farewell tour. I went to see The Who. And something happened. They were driving into Tempe.
When they were young, it was the first time farewell tour.
They had a reunion tour, a farewell tour back before it was popular to do so.
Keith Moon was still playing drums then, right?
I think he'd passed away. But I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, so I don't even know if I knew who was in the band. I remember going with a friend of mine, and I'm like, are we having fun? And we kind of looked at each other and like, yeah, we must be. We're at a big concert. And it was a great time. But I remember as we were waiting for the show to start, and we had some seats in the back of the Horseshoe, Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, and the show was running late. And I remember hearing the guys going, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, 1, 2. And all of a sudden, there was a little pause, and the guy goes, well, what do you want me to say? Fuck, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I later came to find out part of the reason we were hearing all those sound check things was they'd had a production issue. Things were delayed, and the crew was scrambling to pull the show off. It was Halloween night. They called it Halloween. It was awesome. It was one of my first shows. And I think that night, just hearing that banter is kind of what got me infected with the bug. Going forward, we've had other things like the Beastie Boys were playing at All Points West. And I think it was Adam Yauch was diagnosed with cancer like a week before the show. So instead of being Tool, the Beastie Boys, and Coldplay, Jay-Z came in at the last minute, saved the day. He headlined the show, and everything was cool. It's a lot easier on a festival. Beyonce was pregnant, kind of ironic given I just told a Jay-Z story. But we postponed her. Lady Gaga filled the date, and everything was cool. So those ones are pretty easy. I would say on a festival, not a big deal if someone bails out. But when it's a solo performer or, a headliner of a 2 or 3 band bill, then it gets a little bit different.
I know it's not the topic, but Paul T takes that shit seriously when a Beyonce cancels that the value of Coachella is what we sold you. So you know that he's going to find a way to deliver an equivalent artist value name in return when that goes away, because that brand is that important and they would never shortcut it.
Right. Even though the show basically sold out for the most part before any of the bands were announced, we still have a caliber and an expectation. And, if we just said, oh, well, and shrugged our shoulders, not only is that audience going to be disappointed, but we're going to lose their trust and not get them back the next year.
So the credibility of delivering with a Lady Gaga is why Coachella is Coachella.
The coolest thing was it's the first time in the history of the world where everyone knew the headliner of Coachella before
a year in advance?
Yeah. I went home and I was talking, I think it was my wife or one of our kids, and I said, I know who's headlining next year. And they're like, no way. And I go, yeah. And they're like, well, Beyonce canceled. How do you know who's headlining next year? I go, Beyonce. And they just thought that was hysterical.
God, I hope she's still worth tickets next year.
We could jokingly say that she definitely took a year to prepare that show. I don't know how long it took, but I actually sent a note to Paul T and Rob Light, and I said, I don't know who's headlining next year, but they better be a gymnast because she raised the bar so high with that show. And at the same time, Lady Gaga, I don't know if you've seen A Star Is Born. There's scenes that were filmed at Coachella and Stagecoach, actually in between the weeks of Coachella. A Star Is Born gets remade every so often. It's like the 4th time they've done it. And every time it just gets better and better. And they knock the ball out of the park.
It's kind of an interesting thing when you see Live Nation and AEG team up, because Stars Born is a Live Nation production.
Right.
But Coachella is an AEG thing. So when you see the two biggest promoters coming together to do something for art and putting their competitors aside for what's best for something, how cool is that?
It's totally cool. I've said to many people, our business is kind of a big roulette table. The companies go one way, the personnel go another. So I've got a group of friends that we've all worked together and done each other's job in some format, but never more than 3 of us at the same company at a time. I took a job in Florida around the time of the SFX roll-up. I was out there for a month. I didn't love it, but I met Drew Cantor. He ended up working for us. He's working at Live Nation. A year after I had left, Taki Pappas went out there. I worked with Tom Alexander, who's now running the Tacoma Dome. When I came to LA, I think he was the first guy I met working at Pace Concerts. So it's cool to just have this group of people that kind of spin around and go back and forth. The other thing I'd say about Live Nation and AEG, Jay-Z is one of their artists. Lady Gaga is one of their artists. They've both played for us.
You're talking about the tour deals.
Yeah, it's their tour deal, but they'll headline our festivals, or Kenny Chesney will go do a run of amphitheater shows. So I tell people, yeah, we go back and forth and we totally compete with each other.
But never get in the way of what's right for the artist.
Right. I mean, we love each other except for when we hate one another, and we hate one another except when we love one another. But at the end of the day, we all are doing the same job. We're all having a good time. I sent Brian O'Connell a note after Las Vegas, and I said, we can compete all we want, but we're brothers. And I was in a situation not as horrific as that, but somewhat similar. I said, no one can tell you they know what you're going through, but I sort of do. And if you need anything, just reach out. And it's just cool because at the end of the day, it's a personality business. Everyone's got to be friendly. We go to each other's shows, and it just makes it more fun and more enjoyable. There's times I'd rather go to their show than ours, because if I'm at ours, I'm probably working. I want to see the show and just hang out sometimes.
When you work in a show as a lawyer, what is the emergency that they'd need to bother the lawyer during the show? What are the things that you get called away from your seat to take care of?
They're incredibly few and far between.
Come quick, we need this verbiage clarified.
I think I've had that happen twice in 10 years. It's usually at a festival when someone decides they need to film or they want us to sign a release. Usually it's something silly that can actually wait a day or two. I think it's more just in case. It's kind of like, you might have a doctor on call and they're like, no one's throat's going out, except if there's not a doctor on call, that'll be the night someone gets a sore throat.
Jay-Z can't perform unless somebody clarifies this disclaimer.
We don't know what time we're supposed to go on, so let's hold it up till the lawyer gets here. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Like I said earlier, I get the deal done or not. The show's still happening at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. So usually it's just to hang out, say hello. I've had times where I've been summoned to a show, but it's usually because we're talking about a future one, and it's just everyone happens to be in town. We're not usually talking about tonight's show has an issue.
talking about cancellations with the great Jason Bernstein. Thank you so much.
Happy to.
Jason just makes us all smarter, Luke. He'll be back in a few weeks with some more free legal advice from his amazing legal mind. How many more times can I use the word legal in this sentence?
I don't know, but we love talking about minds on this show. And he's got the best minds, Dan. He's got the best genes, the best mind, some of the best minds.
We've got the best minds here at Promoter 101. All of the shows we do make money. All of them. We have the best shows. We have the best acts.
We actually do have the best people.
We're such assholes.
I'm Harvey Cohen with Live Nation Canada, and I'm here on Promoter 101.
In our final interview this week, we're joined by Alex Kochan, here to talk about some Guns N' Roses, Paul McCartney, as well as his time at BGP and AEG.
Alex Kochan has been on all sides of the business as a promoter, an agent, did the tech thing, did the tour manager thing. Like, you truly have risen up through the ranks. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Dan, I love your spot here in Auburn. You've done a great job in building a business, and I'm happy to be sitting in this chair.
You have a historic career because when you were an agent, you worked with some of the biggest bands in the world. You owned Artists and Audience, and we're talking about Nine Inch Nails, Guns N' Roses. McCartney, you had a fucking Beatle.
It's true. Paul was maybe the best artist to work with. I don't want to diminish any of my relationships with any of the other artists because I've been blessed. I've had a wonderful career. Sometimes I have to pinch myself just to remember, God, I started back then, and how did I get to where I got to? It's miraculous in a way. Being a kid that had no concept about music business, got started, in 1968, just getting a job sweeping up in a club.
Which club and which market did you start in?
So I was going to college in Chicago, Columbia College, just transferred there out of NYU the year before. So I moved there in 1968. It was the day after the Democratic Convention left town, showed up there, and my roommate from New York came with me. One night we went to this club, the Kinetic Playground.
It's a legendary club.
A legendary club.
I like how you just went past the day the Democratic Convention left Chicago, like it wasn't a disaster area of the town. So you got there the day after, like, hell broke loose.
Right. And I remember walking through Grant Park. My hair was about as long as yours now, which is not really very long, but you have sideburns. I think I had sideburns then too. I was almost assaulted by a cop who called me a effing hippie. I thought he was going to attack me. But so my roommate and I, we went to this club, the Kinetic Playground, which was $5 to get in. We had to pay cash at the door. I remember when we left, which was late at night, I remember standing out on the street. It was really cold at that time in Chicago. They said, we can't spend $5 every weekend to come here. And I said, well, we got to get jobs. So there was this guy standing outside the club and seen him in the club, in the box office. And so I went up to him. I said, do you work here? He said, yeah, I own the club. His name was Wally Marowitz. And Wally was partners with Aaron Russo, who was also the owner of the club. One thing led to another. He had gone to NYU. I just transferred from there. And after about 15 minutes, I asked him for a job. He said he didn't have any jobs available. And so I told him I would work for free.
I work for tickets.
I worked for free. And, it's really dirty in there. What about you just give me a broom and a garbage can? I'll go around and I'll clean up. He said, okay, you come back. You can be the janitor. So I went back and told my roommate, and he said, well, what about me? So I went back and I saw Wally. I said, you know what? Look, both of us want the job. We'll both come in and do the job. We'll both work for free. He did pay us about $15 a night or something like that. But it was a great introduction to the business. I wound up not only sweeping up during all of the shows, but in those days, there was no stage crew.
Grab an amp, kid.
Open up the door in the back at 5 o'clock. It was B.B. King. Can you help me with this amplifier?
Wow.
The Grateful Dead played there. And I had to set up the dressing rooms.
Like hospitality?
Whatever there was, a loaf of white bread. Wally would say, go out and get a new bottle of ketchup, new bottle of mustard. They don't like to use anything that's been opened before. I was 18 at the time. In Chicago, you had to be 21 to drink, but I would run across the street to the package store to get booze for the bands. James Cotton, he wanted his champagne. Muddy Waters wanted a particular drink. Somebody wanted a pinch pint of vodka, and they'd go back and forth. And so I was doing hospitality. I was also running around with a bucket.
Whatever they needed.
Yeah, whatever they needed. That was the beginning, right? So look back on Wally Marowitz giving me that job. What a strange miracle, blessing, right? Then I meet him again when I moved back to New York years later, and he is part owner in an agency called ATI, American Talent International. And through a long story that I can't make short, Jeff Franklin, who was the main owner of the business, had brought me in for an interview because I had been working at Queen Booking, which was owned by Ruth Bowen, and her clients were Aretha Franklin and Sammy Davis Jr., Ray Charles, and Ruth Bowen gave me my first job as an agent.
Oh, wow.
So Jeff had acquired Blood, Sweat, and Tears, who I had also been a road manager for a few years before that. And nobody in the agency knew how to book Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Where would they play? Because that's such a thick horn section like Chicago, but they're a little bit more bluesy.
They wanted to do sit down in a club, do multiple nights.
But was that more of like a seated show, or were people standing for them back in the day?
They wanted to do ballroom shows where by that point in their career, and nobody in the rock agency, I mean, they had ZZ Top, Kiss, the Eagles. So nobody knew how to book that stuff. But just because I got this job at Queen Booking, I called up Fred Heller, who I had worked with. He was the manager of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, just tell him what I was doing. Oh, I'm an agent now. I'm working at this place. Well, who you got over there? You know, Franklin, Sammy Davis Jr. He said, well, Sammy Davis Jr., you got to get Blood, Sweat, and Tears on the opening act at the Greek Theater.
BS&T and Sammy Davis? Yeah, that's a great show.
Can you get that done? And I said, well, let me see. And I went to Ruth, and she made it happen. So Blood, Sweat, and Tears goes to ATI. Nobody knows how to book it. Fred says, oh, you got to get this guy Alex over at Queen Booking. So Jeff calls me in. We have an interview. He said, you got to go meet my partner. I walk into Wally's office, and it's the guy who hired me in Chicago.
Here's a trash can and a broom. We'll give you $15, Alex. There's a phone.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of my rock and roll agent career, you know, at ATI.
Now, you had done the agent thing for a very long time and were very successful at it.
I learned from a lot of good people. I really did. Jeff was great. What a great mentor he was. Wally was terrific, although some of the lessons that I learned from Wally, you know, didn't really apply in the business into the future. You know, he used to stand on his desk and scream at Bill Graham. You know, once he sent him a case of axle grease.
Because he was screwing him?
Yeah. People would clear desks in those days. It was Wild West.
Now let's talk about it. 92, you opened up Artists and Audience, and you had a 10-year run of dominating. But let's talk about the list of agents that played the game here. Andrew Waters, Barry Weisblatt, Dan Hirsch, Jerry Gerard, Jonathan Levine, Ken Vermeglish, Nat Farnham, Nick Harris, Sam Kirby, Tim Bortler. Holy shit.
You know, there was something going on in that company that, you know, I started the thing after I left ICM because we couldn't come to terms after I did Paul McCartney and Guns N' Roses there. And to be honest with you, I just thought that what the agency needed to have was a touring division, you know, that this was the way the business was going, that you need to package the whole tour, which was kind of the way that we got McCartney there. I wanted to represent all the rights, you know, commercial rights, merchandise, and put together a network of promoters that would then guarantee the artist a huge amount of money. At the same time, although I kind of knew about it, but Michael Cole had just gotten the Rolling Stones from Bill Graham.
As a tour promoter.
As a tour promoter. It seemed to me, you know what? Agencies need to get into this packaging the whole tour instead of working one promoter per market. Maybe you could bundle all of the cities together.
Kind of a precursor to what Live Nation's now doing with the tour deals.
Kind of in a way. And the agency was, I don't know if we want to do that. But I thought that was the direction that eventually, if you were going to represent an artist like Guns N' Roses or Paul McCartney, eventually you were going to have to be able to control the whole tour. You're going to have to control the money that way. You might even have to pay the artist or guarantee the money up front. And would have been a different agency model, but, you know, no agency went for that.
So you started your own.
So I started my own, hoping that I could eventually find a way to have a touring division that would buy the tours. And I did a few tours that way. I did a Ministry tour that way where I bought the whole tour. I did a Penn and Teller tour that way where I bought the whole tour and then sold it off to
so
local
basically
promoters.
Buying futures.
Well, guaranteed and paid huge upfront money for all of the dates. So it was buying futures that I would then sell off.
Let's talk about how you get in the room with a Paul McCartney or a Guns N' Roses. You get a chance to even pitch them the deal because these aren't exactly people that just take meetings with just anybody. And then you got to close them. So this is some next level shit.
Well, technically, I didn't do the tour deals with Paul McCartney and Guns N' Roses.
But you were their agent.
I was just their agent.
You weren't the Beatles agent, though. At some point, you got to be in a room with Paul McCartney and you pitched him.
Very interesting. As you know, Paul doesn't go out looking for his own people. He has people working for him. And Paul has a huge operation, MPL. He had his manager at the time, Richard Ogden, had been the manager of the first band I ever signed at ATI, which was the Motors. They were on Virgin Records, and I was a newly minted agent at ATI. And Wally took me to England early on in my career at the agency, and we met people at record companies. And I met Richard. And Virgin Records at the time was just bustling. They had all the juice in London. So kind of hooked up with their American representative through Richard and did some stuff with them. The Motors never really had much of a career, although I did generate a tour for them, which, it's funny now, you think about it. But as an agent, I had a territory at ATI, which was essentially all of the states in the Old South. Virginia, Florida, all the way over to Texas, Oklahoma.
Cellar door country and then into Pace.
I mean, there were like 100 shows that we could do. When a big act would go out on the road, like ZZ Top or Kiss, I would say, well, can I have them for a couple of months? They said, no, you got 2 weeks, because there were so many markets that you could have played in those days. But we also had AC/DC, we had UFO, and there were some markets that, even though they weren't really headliners, I sold some of the promoters in that area on co-headlining UFO, AC/DC, and then I put the Motors on as the opening act.
Packaging.
And we did low tickets. So we played arenas, 8,000-seat arenas with reduced ticket prices.
And it sold?
It sold.
Very similar to what Kid Rock's been doing in the amphitheaters with the low ticket prices. Yeah.
It sold very well. Yeah. We had one market for AC/DC, Jacksonville, which was a hot market at the time. I think we may have even sold 10,000 tickets there.
That's amazing. And ticket prices were much lower back then, right?
Less than $10, right?
Yeah. So a service fee on that show now would be $20.
Primitive era, there was maybe one T-shirt or 2 T-shirts. Ticket charges were more like the promoter would put down 5% ticket commission, and everything was hard tickets then. They had their own network of people that would go out and distribute the tickets. So getting back to Motors, that was Richard. He winds up many years later managing Paul McCartney. He calls me up one day, I'm then at ICM, and says, do you want to book Paul McCartney? And I laughed at him. Just said, sure. It was hilarious, right? He said, well, you're the only one that's laughed at me when I brought that up, because he was going around to everybody, Tom Ross, and Wayne Forte, and all these other people trying to make a deal for somebody to book Paul McCartney. And that would have been 1988. It wasn't like he just gave me the act. I put together a proposal, and the proposal was really to represent all the rights. And we got the act. We got the tour, and we did a great commercial with Visa. We represented him to Visa, and they gave us a huge deal for sponsorship, but we insisted it would include a commercial. And the commercial in 1989 kind of made a big difference.
It was like the My Brave Face tour, right?
Yeah. Flowers in the Dirt.
I remember the crazy light spinning in the Visa commercial with My Brave, My Brave.
Yeah, yeah. That was, for an agency to do something like that in 1988 or 1989, that was a little unheard of, because agents were really on the verge of just becoming more or less like geography clerks. This was, Cole had just taken the Stones from Bill Graham, who was totally depressed about that.
Cole was depressed, or Graham was depressed?
Graham was stunned that could happen. You read his book, you'll see. But the drive for lower commissions by these top headlining acts was reducing services that the agents could provide. Oh, we've got lawyers who'll do that. We've got our own people. The managers would do it. And agents were really having less and less to do with all of the rights to the tour. So Richard gave us this opportunity, and ICM thankfully had the wherewithal to be able to step up to the plate and provide these services. It's a full service agency.
So at some point, you had gone through the agency side, had massive success there, but you wound up as a promoter. You wound up at BGP, and actually here in the Northwest. So you moved from New York to Seattle and wound up running the BGP office in Seattle, which became Clear Channel Seattle at some point, and eventually Live Nation. But how did that switch from one side to the other happen?
Artist and Audience had a 10-year run. There were a lot of great people that came into the Artist and Audience, agents. Some people came in as assistants and became agents. Some people came in straight as agents. And at one point, the size of the business got really huge, and then it got small. As people left, they went off and took bands, and the size of the roster shrank. And then I moved the company from New York City. I decided that I wanted to go to like a Main Street USA and have a small company and just represent like a handful of acts. I didn't want to be involved in having a big company anymore.
You just wanted to focus on your business.
I just wanted, I wanted to go back to a small roster, McCartney, Guns N' Roses, Marilyn Manson, Nine Inch Nails, the handful of others, and a few agents came with me, but technically Guns would never work again in that period.
Right. So it's a cool name to have on the roster.
They
were
were working. They were working on Chinese Democracy, and people were, leaving the band. And McCartney essentially had decided that he was going to retire. Linda had died, and so he went through a period of mourning. And so there was really no work that either Guns or McCartney were going to do in that period. It pretty much by 2002 was over. I just lost interest. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I had started to paint, and I just developed this idea that, I think I'm just going to be a painter. I'm going to be an artist. Closed the office. There were a couple of people left in it, and I retired from the business to be a painter. Was living up in Pawling, New York, Quaker Hill, and had a studio up there. And
became a hippie.
And I wrote poetry every day, and I painted. I sold 90% of all the music business memorabilia. I just said, I think I really need to make a change and to get rid of all this and to start fresh. And that's what I did for 2 years. And then I got a call from somebody and said, we need someone to open up an office in Seattle to be a promoter.
And this was the timed right as BGP got the amphitheater opened up at White River.
That was White River Amphitheater. And I thought, well, I'd never really been a promoter. And I got intrigued. And 2 months later, here I was in Seattle, driving over to White River Amphitheater. I mean, you've been there.
It's just down the street.
It's right down the road. Yeah. We also had at the time Clark County Amphitheater in Vancouver,
Washington.
Yeah. So Clear Channel was the company that bought from Bob Sillerman, bought everything that SFX had rolled up, and Clear Channel had an idea. This was part of that idea for the next 2 years or so, 04, 05. They decided at the end of 05 they were going to spin it off, and that became Live Nation. And what happened was that Live Nation, before it became Live Nation, they closed the office in Seattle. We had a small group of people there. I was there, and they closed the office.
So they have you come into a market, and you're now competing with Jeff Trisler, who at that point is House of Blues. He's got the Gorge, and he's been buying in the market since Bauer Kinnear days. He's entrenched, and he's been cultivating the business here for decades and booking the legendary Gorge. You come in with the guys from San Francisco who are also legendary, but not so much up here. They have the amphitheater, which is a competing amphitheater, but they can buy Portland and Seattle as a block versus the Gorge buying its own date. So there's an advantage there, but you're coming into a market that's very well trenched out, doing a job that you've always been on the other side of the table on. They had to present a whole lot of challenges.
It was interesting. And here's the thing. When I had my agency, Jeff did all my acts. Jeff came from the Bauer side of things, Media One. And then with Kinnear, they had a company together. I mean, when I did McCartney at the Kingdom here, Jeff settled the show for the promoters. And then he did Nine Inch Nails at the Gorge. He did a lot of shows for me. We did Marilyn Manson at the Moore Theater. So I respected Jeff and knew that he was a great talent buyer, and he had great rooms to work with. And House of Blues was formidable. So yeah, how am I going to get shows into this amphitheater? It's not quite in Seattle, but then again, neither is the Gorge. So it was a challenge. The thing about Clear Channel at the time was, since it was the rolled up promoter network that SFX had, and all of those guys on the Monday phone call, these are people that I had worked with on the other side of the table. You find out. I mean, a lot of agents don't really know what it's like to be a promoter. they can guess, they can think this is what you do, and then
But you know where the bodies are hidden.
But then you get to be a little more knowledgeable about what really happens, but you never really ever are a promoter when you're an agent. There's something different about being a promoter, about having to go to an agent and talk about getting an act.
Well, there's also a check and balance in that process where you as the agent are trying to put as much money in the artist's pocket as possible. And the promoter is trying to keep everything as low as possible. And there's a check and balance there with keeping the ticket prices at that supply and demand level by the two of them fighting it out to, okay, this is unreasonably too high for this market. And you're like, the artist needs, and you find that middle ground, hopefully, where the show can be successful, but we're not skinning the fan alive and leaving something there for them to be able to buy a pretzel and a beer.
Right. And you learn, I learned that, so even if I had more money to give somebody, why would I get the date if they've worked with somebody else over and over and over? So it was, like I say, it was interesting. I got shows, but working in amphitheater, you kind of work all winter to get stuff for the summer. Some of it doesn't confirm until late March, April. You're on pins and needles trying to figure out whether you're going to get it or not. You go to LA a lot. Call up the agents, you make a pest of yourself, you do everything you can to try to make the situation right for the act that the agent would know you're going to do the best job. Best job, you'll make the most money, you'll play in front of the most people, etc. This is the right room for you, this is the right ticket price, this is the right experience. We've got great backstage, we've got great crews. What do you need? You need us to take care of you in some way, you just roll out the red carpet.
Now, you wound up leaving Clear Channel, but staying in Seattle. You found a home here and wound up taking some time off, but then coming back as part of AEG here.
Yeah, I guess the Polestar Celebrity Access said that the office was closed. And I got a call the next day from Larry Fallon at AEG and said, what are you going to do? I hadn't even thought about what I was going to do. So Larry and John Meglin, and eventually I met Tim Lewicki up here in Seattle, and we all had dinner together with Tom Rizzardino, Randy Phillips, and they had this concept of a theater that they were going to open at Quest Field, which eventually became
the WAMU
Theater. And they offered a pretty attractive package. And I wondered, are we just going to do this theater? Because I didn't really want to step into another situation where it was just a challenge venue to have to work with, which White River, frankly, was. Do you want to have a real office here? Or do you want to do soup to nuts, club to stadium? Are you interested in the bigger picture? Do you want to do a regional office, or do you want to do just me go in and do this theater? Tim was like, whatever you want to do.
Your market, go have fun.
So, well, how much do you want to spend? He named a figure, and I thought, okay, yeah, I can do something with that.
Okay, and you didn't just do that room. You wound up buying both the show boxes?
Yeah, we did that room. I got Marsha Vlasic sold me the talent for the second night.
Van Morrison, right?
Yeah, Van Morrison. Had Seal for the first night. Seal I got from CAA, but the manager was someone I had worked with, Tom Consolo, who had been tour manager when I was the co-manager of REO Speedwagon. So, the outcomes of the book with the contacts, try to make things happen. Marsha actually had the office next to mine at ATI. Marsha was great. When everybody said, what do we want this Blood, Sweat, and Tears here for? I think I had just booked the Waldorf Astoria for like a week run with them for like almost $1 million or something at the time. And said, look at that. Nothing wrong with
That's real money. That's what $1 million was, a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. So there was the WAMU, and we went through some growing pains to be able to integrate a sports stadium into developing a theater experience. And here in Seattle, where they have the Paramount Theater, which does a fantastic job, we're competing with that particular experience. Let's try to make it similar, as good as we can, so that we really have a theater experience. And they were very accommodating. They really worked hard to try to develop that place. And ultimately, you look at the number of acts that cycled through there and the caliber of the talent, they did pretty well. I remember what Elliot Roberts managed Neil Young. Neil Young's playing there. And I'm not out of line here, but, Neil hated the room. It's the convention center with a theater curtains and seating in it. Neil hated the room and said, Elliot, why are you here? And he said, it's 5,000 seats. 5,000 seats versus 2,400 seats,
There's some extra incentive. I get it.
Right.
So you switch sides, you've done them both, and then at some point you guys get involved with Bumper Shoot as AEG too, right? There's a relationship that forms there.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I did was we bought the Showbox clubs in 2008, which I had tried to get Clear Channel to buy in 2004 and almost did, but they probably didn't want to expand beyond the amphitheater, but got close. So when I got to AEG, I contacted Peter and Jeff, and we were able to make a deal. So we bought the Showbox clubs, and shortly thereafter, a deal that was generated out of LA for Bumbershoot, we got involved in for the next 3 years. Although at that point, we were more of a funding partner. We didn't have really much hands-on to do with the festival there.
Obviously, AEG's gotten more involved over the years with that, but that led to you meeting your wife. You guys must have known each other when you were in New York, though.
No. We met across the table at lunch during the AEG Bumbershoot One Reel meeting in Los Angeles. I didn't know who she was. She kind of knew who I was, and we were the two people that had to manage the deal.
When she was an agent working for Frank Barcelona, you didn't know her?
No.
Wow, because she was at Premiere.
She was at Premiere. She worked with Barbara and Frank, and I didn't know her at all. She had also worked at Famous. I knew some people there, but I didn't know Michelle. Yeah, we got close. Tom Miserandino, who was the COO of AEG, would always say, well, what do we get out of Bumbershoot? Well, Alex got a wife, at least that, And then I got the Puyallup Fair, which is now the Washington State Fair. And then I got Marymore. And so the assembly of the development of the office grew, and it became a solid office for AEG.
It's quite a career. Now, you've retired from the entire world of music and you found a new career in real estate, but you had this amazingly epic career that started out from working for free and sweeping up to booking Paul McCartney and Guns N' Roses, and then booking the amphitheaters and doing it all. Like, you've promoted U2, you've booked McCartney. There really wasn't much left for you to do on the side of the business. You kind of did it all.
I do think I've just had a wonderful opportunity. I hope I've done some good things and have a great deal of respect for most people in the business and have had a terrific career. I love listening to your podcast.
Do you listen? That's awesome.
I do. My favorite one so far was Carl Leighton Pope, because Carl was the Motors agent. I listened to that and I thought, if I ever do one of these things, I got to be able to shrink the timeline the way Carl did. He just keeps going.
That guy's amazing.
So in 2014, my run in the music business came to a close. AEG and I parted ways, and I went off to do something else. Something else is real estate, and I'm having a blast doing that.
You're knocking beats up now, right? You could do whatever you wanted at this point.
If there was something to do in the music business that was interesting, I certainly would take a look at it.
Yeah, I love that. Alex, thank you so much for walking us through your career. It's just an amazing history lesson. I always appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you asking me to do it, Dan, and have a good day.
Alex is a solid guy. He's been a friend and a mentor for the better part of the last 15 years, and I'm thrilled that he could sit down and just share some of that knowledge. Talk about the better minds that we have. We got the best minds, Luke. We really do.
The best minds on Promoter 101, Dan.
The best minds.
This is Eric Dimmenstein from Ground Control Touring. I'm on Promoter 101.
Hey, Dan. It's time for some birthdays. November 9th to the 15th, 2018. Let's start out Friday the 9th, wishing a big happy birthday to Universal Music Group's Monique Newman, Phil Rosenthal, and Jeff Harrison.
Hey, on the 10th, that's Saturday, all the way up to the Morrison Center in Boise for Desi Edson. Best box office. We got the best birthdays, Luke. We really do have the best birthdays.
We do have the best birthdays, including on Sunday 11th, the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week for episode 108, Mr. Greg Parmley from ILMC, Mike Patton, Mike Park, and Emporium Presents' own, the man holding down Birmingham, Alabama, Mr. Todd Coder.
Monday the 12th, Derek Schaefer.
On Tuesday, the 13th, Dan, Emporium Presents must just be having a giant week-long birthday party because Jordan Gurrence in your Denver office is celebrating a birthday, as is AC Entertainment's Ted Heinig, Frank Mull, and Russell Brantley.
Shout out to Jordan. Everybody calls him Toast that loves him. Happy birthday, dude. Wednesday the 14th, Matthew Kaplan.
And on Thursday the 15th, ICM Partners, Mike Hayes, From the great north, from Toronto, Stephen Riff, and our dear friend and Eventbrite music general mensch, Mr. Jeff White. Happy birthday.
Your best birthday's on the 15th, really. Speaking of that, you said Eventbrite, and I know you'll probably talk about this in the news if that's earlier in the show, so you probably already did, but Ticketfly's gone, right? Now it's just Eventbrite? That just happened?
It is gone. We got an email from Mr. Dreskin this morning making the announcement that Ticketfly has successfully moved over their clients to Eventbrite Music.
This blows my mind.
End of an era.
Well, happy birthday to everybody from, well, me and Luke.
I am Barbara Hubbard.
Mark Campana,
Ted Heinig,
Skip Richmond,
Nick Miller,
Joshua Knight,
Darren Rosen,
Brian Hill,
Greg Wolf,
Darren Zimmerman,
Scott Jampino,
Jason Bernstein.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101, the greatest podcast in all the land.
The quote of the week comes to us from Freddie Mercury of Queen. Seemed timely with the movie coming out. A concert is not a live rendition of the album. It's a theatrical event. I think that might just apply particularly to Queen.
Yeah, that could as well too, Dan, for sure. This is going to do it for episode 108 of Promoter 101. Thank you to all of our guests, Trey Manny from Paradigm, also Alex Kochan, AG's Jason Bernstein. Thank you, everybody who's tuning into this podcast. We sincerely appreciate it very much. Looking forward to episode 109.
Feel free to write us at Steiny at Promoter 101. Tell us if there's somebody you want us to put on the podcast. If it's you, don't be afraid. Say, hey, I would be an amazing guest because I'm the best. We like that.
The best. So next week, we're going to have the godfather of ticketing, the one and only Fred Rosen, founder of Ticketmaster. He's going to break down how he built Ticketmaster into a household name, the behemoth that it is today. Plus, we got John Penn on this podcast just days before he left his post at APA. Excited to see how that plays out versus what we're going to see in the news. And we've got a war story from APA's Susan Rosenbluth. Great podcast next week. Make sure you tune in next week, November 15th.
I think I'm the only person in the world that has gotten a chance to hear that Fred Rosen interview so far, and I gotta tell you, from a mergers and acquisition point, holy shit, that's a cool story. The guy just bought everything that was around him. It was amazing. And his mind is, well, it's next level. Also, on the 22nd, we'll be airing that Billboard Live keynote with Bernie Cahill and myself in its entirety. So that'll be fun.
Looking forward to it. Until then, we're going to be wishing you sold out shows for the weeks to come.
Cheers!
Cheers!
This is Mike Hayes with ICM. You're on Promoter 101.
Ba-da-ba-ba.